Okay, maybe we should reconvene.
Shall we go live, sir?
Yeah, maybe we can, so that participants may feel more encouraged.
Vasan, we are going live. I'm clicking the broadcast. Is okay?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I think people are joining. Maybe you can give a minute or two and then we'll start.
Sir, at 5:32?
Sorry?
Sir, at 5:32 or
Yeah.
what time?
Another minute. I think there's people coming in, so. Okay, I think we can start.
Good evening and a warm welcome to all our viewers on Facebook and Zoom, Facebook Live and Zoom. We welcome you to the BASIX Sabke Samvad, a conversation with social sector innovators, influencers, and integrators. This is the first session in the series of Nagarajan Impact Dialogues and our tribute to late Mr. V. Nagarajan, founding advisor and auditor of the BASIX Social Enterprise Group, a stellar personality who has left behind a legacy and an imprint on the social sector. BASIX Sabke Samvad is a joint effort of BASIX and Sabke to remember all those efforts. The BASIX Sabke Social Enterprise Group was founded by Mr. Vijay Mahajan in the year 1996, and it is a pioneer in promoting livelihoods ever since. The group has since grown and evolved under his leadership and guidance into 9 entities and with works in the fields of financial inclusion, skill development, consulting for the social sector, waste management, institutional development, and climate change, among others. Sabke, a corporate banking correspondent, offers affordable, accessible, and scalable financial solutions to the underserved. Sabke has been consistently recognized for its pioneer work by entities such as the World Bank, the Scotch Foundation, the MasterCard Foundation, and many more. We continually strive to provide better services by incorporating new learnings, and Basic Sabke Samvad is a small step in that direction. This series is our effort to bring veterans and disruptors of the sectors onto a common platform to share their views, learnings, and lessons about innovation, technology, finance, and governance. Now, I request everybody to post questions in the Q&A section, and we will try to address as many questions as possible in the last 15 minutes of the session. Stay tuned for what is undoubtedly going to be stimulating and engaging sessions. Without further ado, I would like to call upon Mr. Sasidhar, CEO and MD of Sabke Impact Solutions, who is also the moderator for today's session on Impact is the New Mainstream. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Prerna, and good evening all. Thank you for joining us on this amazing event. It is indeed an honor to have this debut session of Nagarajan Impact Dialogues with Vineet Rai, who I consider is a rock star in impact investments in India. Vineet is someone who doesn't hesitate to speak his mind and call a spade a spade. It is rather tough to introduce Vineet without missing something really important. I'll try though. A self-made social entrepreneur and coming from a seemingly unrelated background in forest management, Vineet Rai has pioneered in the entrepreneurship-based approach to solving some of the most complex development problems. He is the founder of Avishkar Group and chairs its executive council. Vineet started dabbling with investments roughly 2 decades ago by taking bets in a few early-stage social initiatives, much before the world of impact investments came into vogue. He learned the trade the hard way. Vineet seemed to have decided fairly early that investments coupled with right advice and on-the-ground practice would go a long way. He went on to build a globally acclaimed value chain of complementary social enterprises. Avishkar Group's ecosystem includes Avishkar Capital, a pioneer in equity-led impact investing, Arohan, one of India's largest new age microfinance institutions, IntelliGrow, a specialized lender and to a small and growing businesses, Tribe, a fintech player, IntelliCap, a thought leader and advisory business with focus on sustainability, and Sankalp Forum, one of the world's largest inclusive knowledge exchange platform. Avishkar Group manages assets in excess of about $1 billion across equity and credit, with 7,000 plus employees present across South and Southeast Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. Vineet has received numerous awards, including Impact Investor of the Year by News Corp, Porter Prize for Strategic Leadership in Social Space, CNBC TV18 Award for being the Catalyst Fund for India, G20 SME Innovation in Finance Award, UNDP IBLF ICC World Business Award, and Lemelson Award for Social Venture Investing. He is an Ashoka Fellow and honorary member of XLRI Alumni Association. Vineet and Avishkar Group were featured on the cover page of Forbes India magazine in January 2019 for their cutting-edge impactful work. Welcome, Vineet, and thank you for having you here, and thanks for taking time out today. There's no better way to pay tribute to V. Nagarajan, who has played such a massive role in developing the sector in his own area of expertise. So today's conversation is titled Impact is the Mainstream for a reason. And that is something we will delve into very shortly. Before that, Vineet, it would be immensely useful for me and the audience perhaps to walk through very quickly the memory lane of your journey, which I believe coincides pretty much with the story of impact investing in India. In maybe 2-3 minutes, would you mind summarizing how this space has evolved, starting with probably why did you rather choose to enter this space, which was practically shunned by the mainstream investors at the time?
Well, first, thank you for that very elaborate introduction. I think that's the best introduction I've ever had in my life. So thank you, Sashi, for that. I'm a forester, as you know, and I actually, unlike most foresters from IFM, I actually did live in and work in a forest. But then I got married, and my wife gave me an ultimatum to find a job outside. So I went to IIM Ahmedabad. Didn't like research, which is what I was doing there, and then set up probably India's first incubator for Government of Gujarat. Ran it for 4 years, and in those So the vision or my connection with rural India did not come from my vision. It was somebody else's vision. Keshubhai Patel, who was the Chief Minister of Gujarat, wanted to actually do something for the farmers of Gujarat, and Professor Anil Gupta at IIM Ahmedabad had the vision that an incubator to help innovations from farmers will work. I just happened to be a 26-year-old who did not know what an incubator meant, and I just took up that job. So that's how I got connected. I learned that business can solve a lot of problems. But I also realized innovation is different from a product is different from a process, and a business. So all of them are very different. You require different skills. But the most important thing is ideas are dime a dozen. Capital that will make those ideas into business just doesn't exist. Also, I realized that capital, there is a dichotomy of capital. Capital is very urban, very infrastructure, very positive. So where rich people live in very metropolitan cities, and so capital and infrastructure for them stays there. And it is not very easy to take money to villages or rural India. So for me, the first learning was that water goes down the hill. Similarly, money actually goes towards cities, not towards villages. But it is not just about money. I also realized that even if I go and give a lot of money to a village, nothing is going to come out of it, because the talent is always running out of the village as well. So if you have to make a difference to rural India, you need capital and you need talent, both to go there. And that's a very difficult thing. All of us have actually found it incredibly difficult. So the theory, long and short of it, I decided to quit my job to start with 5,000 rupees of personal capital, with a slightly stupid idea of setting up capital provider for rural India. That's how Avishkar started. And IntelliCap was set up to provide talent for that. Now, of course, I neither had an idea of how to run IntelliCap nor Avishkar. But sometimes if you are young, you are naive, and you are a forester, you can become a bad financer. And that's what happened to me. I chose to become a bad financer. The evolution of impact investing, I believe impact investing actually started almost at the same time, even though the name came in 2008. While I was doing all this as a 29-year-old, Jacqueline Novogratz was starting something very similar called Acumen in United States of America, and both of us did not know each other from here. And Sir Ronald Cohen was starting something almost similar using his experience. So Ronald Cohen was coming from Apex Partners, world's largest venture fund at that time, and wanted to set Bridges Ventures to actually start something that will create impact. I was coming from the forest with my $100 to start a fund in India. And Jacqueline was coming from Rockefeller Foundation, so very philanthropic background, to start a philanthropic fund that will make a difference to India, Kenya, and I think Pakistan, India, Pakistan, and Kenya. With the idea, all the three of us were trying to, coming from different background, were trying to harness entrepreneurship to create jobs, livelihoods, reduce risk and vulnerabilities. And that's how the journey started world over. Is exactly at the same time, three people who came to know each other 10 years later, by the way. And in India, my journey actually, in some sense, also it came along with the microfinance evolution. So Vikram Akula, I had met Mr. Mahajan in 98 or 99. He was the first person I told that I'm going to quit my job and start a fund. And Mr. Mahajan, being Mr. Mahajan, he encouraged me to be stupid, which is why he's my mentor and probably one of the best mentors. Never told me how stupid and how difficult it would be. Probably I would have never started it. But microfinance actually was really the value creator for impact investing. Because while we always thought microfinance was separate from us, I actually, for example, never invested in microfinance till 2007. But the success of microfinance made a huge difference to the idea of impact investing. And a lot of people actually started coming to my impact investing thought process, which is agriculture, water, waste, sanitation, artisanal stuff, simply because they started saying, oh, we did not know microfinance. It came from nowhere and became so successful. So the mainstream capital started looking at impact investing as well. Of course, the impact investing journey has not been as colorful and as beautiful and filled with as much of ups and down stories as microfinance has been. And some of us as impact investors have benefited hugely by the success of microfinance as well. But the narrative has actually been that how do you harness the potential of an entrepreneur, the zeal of an entrepreneur, by providing capital to connect those who are left excluded from the economy to become part of the economy and therefore gain some level of equilibrium. So.
Very, very inspiring. So thanks for sowing that seed. I think in some sense, it triggered a lot of other such initiatives, and we are here. However, we are in midst of a global pandemic that nobody has seen coming. I'm sure none of you have accounted for in any of your investment plans as well. But what is the mood out there among your peers in India, maybe among India-focused overseas funds? It has been reported in, I think, one of the GIN reports that about $100 billion of foreign investment has already been withdrawn from emerging markets in the last 3 to 4 months. Is there any such trend observed in social impact space as well?
Yeah, well, so see, I think money is actually very classical in its thought process. The first probably insight that I gained about money was that when there is instability, money goes into coma. It doesn't want to act. So when something like COVID strikes, anybody with money is seen to be stupid if they actually try to take bets. Now, I have always believed that impact investing, therefore, is the less intelligent, but more impactful and more thinking, more capital with heart. So generally, it should be the one that should be acting when commercial capital is not acting. And generally, I have been right, even though it has not come from the mainstream impact investors, but it comes from development finance institutions. So the IFCs, the CDCs, the SIDBs, the NABARDs of the world should get very active during these periods of time, while the global mainstream capital would actually become inactive. And what you have heard in terms of hundreds of billions of dollars being withdrawn is essentially coming from a very classical thought process of when there is turbulence, don't really make investments. If anything, go liquid. And that's really what is happening. If you ask any economist of any value or worth, that's the advice they will give. So I think it's a very classical reaction to a unprecedented problem, and unprecedented is very cliche, but let's actually be very clear. I don't think so world has seen this kind of contraction, even during World War I and II. Remember that even World War I and II, the rest of the world was really operating. In COVID, the whole world stopped. And that's really quite an unprecedented by any stretch of imagination challenge that we have yet not comprehended what we are talking about. I mean, a lot of the discourses that I hear are really off-the-cuff remarks coming from people based on untested model, also very speculative. Therefore, I would actually suggest to everyone take any advice or any speculative statement with a pinch of salt, because the only definite thing that I can tell you is none of us know what is happening.
Yeah, so fair enough, and it's indeed money is money, so one has to treat it the way it is. However, you may be aware I've spent some time with the impact funds myself in my career before returning as a practitioner again. Observed with close quarters a for-profit fund, a US-based for-profit fund, a non-profit fund, also as a DFI, that is the World Bank. I felt that there is kind of a lot of confusion about what is the expectation these investors really have, the social/impact investors. In order to prove themselves that they are no less commercial, it so sometimes happens that the return expectations were projected at a much higher level than a typical debt fund or a PE fund. This has been noticed more often than not. It seems like some kind of a guilt trip these guys are on. What is your view on this observation? You need to show higher returns to support the claims for impact, or is it because the quote-unquote greedy capitalists have entered the space and spoiled the game, so you need to sort of focus more on financial returns and just write impact on reports? And am I being unfair here?
Well, I think so let's actually try to first understand how it starts. So the road to hell is paved with good intention. It's actually a very nice dictum, but that applies to all of us. It happened to microfinance as well. It happens to any society, any this thing. I think impact investing, the thought process, in my view, has very little to do with impact or investing. It is actually a challenge to capital. And if you look at just the idea of the power of impact investing, you are essentially going and challenging the hegemony of capital. You are trying to tell those who are investing for greed, those who are investing to return at all cost, that, hey, there is a reason why you should make returns, and that reason is that the world should sustain and the world should be a better place. Now, nobody has done this or paraphrased this better than Sustainable Development Goals that have been signed by 193 countries of the world, which say that we want to imagine a world free of hunger, free of inequity, and free of poverty. Not very far, 2030. Now, the imagination of Sustainable Development Goals are very beautifully encapsulated in the needs of what impact investing is. The challenge with impact investing is it came up in 2001 with all of us coming up with different ideas, different thought process, and got a name called impact investing in 2008 when some of us got together and said, how do we call ourselves the same by same name? And impact investing was conceptualized as a name there. The key challenge is we are all trying to use the power of entrepreneurship to bring about a change. And when you are doing this, you are trying to showcase that I am as good in terms of generating returns as anybody else. Now that's where we went wrong. We wanted to actually say, you can make money while doing good. Instead, we started saying, you can do good and do well. Now that is where the problem starts, because then you are effectively saying, I will have my cake and eat it too. Unfortunately, that is not so true. Now, when you are opportunistic and you're only trying to make money, you can invest in guns, you can invest in mining, you can do anything, and you are only focused on returns. You do not take into account how those returns can get damaged down the line, because short-termism is how you are driven by. Impact investing essentially tells you to think long-term. That if you try to make 25% return and in the process damage the process, you will sometimes somebody else is going to lose the money, and therefore you are not making that return. Unfortunately, this is too complex for anybody who's coming from a classical MBA. So our problem is we have a large number of management graduates coming from the top institutions whose ability to comprehend the depth of statement that while you are trying to do good, you can do well, requires patience, requires a very different attitude towards looking at business, and requires a different screen and a different thought process. Your success of delivering 25% return is not your success. Unfortunately, that has been forgotten. In our desire to prove to the world that we are the next big kid on the mainstream, we actually first went and told people that if you have a good idea, you are able to say, I am going to do good, and there is no way to measure it. So I just stand up and say, hey, I want to do good. And then I actually put a suffix behind my name saying, I am so and so impact, Avishkar impact. I become an impact investor. That's the threshold. So a statement, self-certified statement, and a suffix is good enough to become an impact investor. And then there is a second mythical question which you are talking about, generating returns and making impact. And how do they get hand in hand? And one of the funny things that is that I have not seen any correlation into making impact and returns. Sometimes you make very high returns, making very high impact. And sometimes you make a lot of impact and no returns. And sometimes you make no returns and make no impact as well. So everything is possible. I think my definition of impact investing has been you walk into a slightly difficult area where commercial capital is not willing to deal because the ecosystem is broken and there is a very limited arbitrage available from a risk reward paradigm. You go and take a risk. If you become successful, you might actually hit the ball out of the park. But there is a chance that you will have high chance of failure. And this risk reward does not fit into a venture capital category, which is also a risk reward paradigm, but in an evolved ecosystem. And that's really what impact investing is. Of course, some people have challenged and said that's not necessarily what impact investing is. It is far broader. And you can come up with new tools that actually give you low returns and low and high impact. And some have said we will actually take high impact and high return. So there are different proponents of it. But I don't believe that you can actually have your cake and eat it too. So there is going to be a give and take if you are an impact investor.
I think that's an honest admission in some sense in terms of making it realistic in the sense that how you balance the two. But then there is this whole notion of measuring the impact, right? How do you then count from an investment perspective? there are all these metrics that you see, there are school enrollment rates, there are health outcomes of a community or a country, number of people accessing or number of adults accessing credit, things like that, which are quite pertinent to, let's say, a specific institution. But how do impact investors claim success in this area, right? Do you take the credit of all the work the underlying investing company is doing, or is it only proportionate to your investment? Do you take claim for the incremental impact post investment? Do you take the cumulative? How does this thing get resolved among investors?
So I think, Shashi, it's a very interesting question and it's a very long debate. I actually had a very radical position on this. And if somebody has read my impact reports, I actually took a position that as an impact fund, I don't make any impact, because the impact is being made by the enterprise. And my only impact that I am making is finding that entrepreneur and giving him the money or her the money. So how can I claim a right over the impact that that entrepreneur is making? And so Avishkar's philosophy has been slightly different. We took a view that first and foremost, we are actually making impact as a fund. And for the only way to measure my impact is the quantum of risk I'm taking, whether I'm going into low income states, whether I'm working with a first generation entrepreneur, whether I'm helping somebody who has never run a business start a business, whether I'm helping him build a business in Samastipur or in Mumbai or in Orissa, etc., etc. And those things actually make me unique and different. Now, if I have actually built a governance system in a company where you have women in the board, there is gender sensitivity, gender balance, you are providing all kinds of rights and privileges, that's how we see our impact. Now, of course, my companies make impact. My companies have outreach, they go to lend to women, they actually are creating water, sanitation, agriculture, healthcare, this thing. We report their performance. That's not my impact, but I report their performance. Avishkar supported companies have generated 250,000 jobs and livelihoods. Now, Avishkar did not do it. Avishkar supported enterprise. My ownership has no meaning. Whether I own 10% or I own 90%, it has no meaning because it has not been done by me. The ownership is a fact of amount of quantum of capital I did. So if I paid the investment when the entrepreneur did not start the company, then for the life of the entrepreneur, I can take all the credit because without my money, the entrepreneur wouldn't have started. It is also possible without my money, that entrepreneur would have started and would have continued with somebody else's money. So then I don't have a role there. And so I actually personally believe that a lot of reporting that people do is slightly vague. It is also not intelligent because people are not really questioning themselves, oh, what is the role in creating the impact? But I think there is a value to the idea of impact, and therefore there are two frameworks that people have been talking about. One is called the ESG framework, which is a framework and a classification. So again, people get confused between impact and... So Avishkar has an impact policy, and I'll just tell you what an impact policy is. We first actually put in a screen, and this screen has evolved. Any entrepreneur who walks into our door first meets that screen. That screen asks some basic questions. Why are you doing what you're doing? And we need to hear your story, and that story must connect. Then he says, okay, I am an impact investor. So why are you an impact investor? Do you actually work with people? You are creating jobs and livelihoods for people who are coming from the lower economic strata, or you are reducing risk and vulnerabilities in the life of people coming from lower economic strata. And so we ask these kinds of questions, and then based on the screen, we make a decision, mostly a subjective decision, yes or no. Once this is yes or no, there is a diligence that happens. Post that, we come up with a metric. Now this metric is something that we are evolving right now. The metrics would be like this. This guy will be valued against a 100 number. Now, for example, Avishkar has made 70 investments and it has created 250,000 jobs and livelihoods over 5 years post-investment. We divide 250,000 by 70. You actually get every company in 5 years creates so many jobs and livelihoods. We ask our investment manager or partner to certify what kind of number will you give to this company in 5 years' time. Will it deliver 10,000 jobs, 1,000 jobs, 500 jobs? And then give it a value, and then you come up with a number. That number will have a pass mark. So either you are above 70 or below 70, and that will tell you that this company actually creates impact or not. There is a significant amount of subjectivity because it's a forecasted number, but you will get rated against this. Then we do something called benchmarking, which is part of the investment memo, where you go in and actually say, okay, guys, you are saying you are going to create jobs, you are going to create livelihoods, you are creating risk and vulnerability. How many jobs you have created as on date? Let's say 15 jobs, 500 livelihoods. And then we will say 5 years down the line, about 1,500 jobs, 15,000 of 1,50,000 livelihoods. And then the investment manager is measured against how it goes over a period of time. But we connect all these metrics to the commercial numbers, because we know jobs will be created only if the company grows. If the company doesn't grow, the job will not get created. So impact metric is in some sense very synonymous to the business metric. And then finally we do is produce an impact report every year where we actually try to share our learnings on the idea of impact. This is how Avishkar's impact metric is. ESG metric on the other side is a risk classification, where you say, I'm giving money to this guy. There is a risk classification A, B, C, D. And if it is C or D, it's very low risk or no risk at all. And if it is A and B, then you see a child risk hazard or a life hazard or a chemical release or something. And then you define how you will mitigate those risks by the framework you're doing. Now, ESG is getting very popular. Avishkar is actually all about impact, but whether we like it or not, we also apply ESG to every framework. So we have both an impact framework and an ESG framework, which essentially helps somebody else to come and ask us and hold us accountable for what we are doing.
Yeah, that's, I think, again, a pretty honest expression saying that, I don't make the impact. Companies that I invest in makes this. I hope, that's the kind of a narrative across. It's a very honest way of rather giving the right credit where it's due. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that the money that goes in from impact investor doesn't make a difference. But it's good to layer it in such a way that there's a risk aspect, there is a metrics part of it, which need to be also taken into account. But now let's come to this whole, again, the notion of the title of the day as well, that impact is the new mainstream. I've heard you, also making, statements in this line. So is it that, since the mainstream investors are beginning to play a dominant role, you think the lines are blurred now that everything is mainstream? Is it that the impact investors should now start like talking less about impact and more about financial returns because it's all money is money? You mentioned, I heard, that you need about $2 trillion every year to reach the SDGs in next 10 odd years. So does it mean that, you have to sell your soul, embrace greed is good, kind of a situation? Because there's no other way that you can actually bring so much capital to the table. I mean, what is that we're trying to convey with this?
I think impact is the new mainstream is actually a provocative claim that I'm making. It has to be accepted by the world. But so I think there is a lot of discussion around mainstreaming impact investing. And I have always asked, so what does mainstreaming means for impact investing? I mean, so there must be something seriously wrong with impact investing that it needs to be mainstream. And the whole origin of impact investing is to challenge the mainstream, because we believe the mainstream, the greed is good philosophy, is actually very damaging for the world and its sustainability. And impact investing is an alternative thought process. Again, impact investing a lot of time has been miscalculated or misadjusted to the idea of philanthropy. People have said, oh, impact investing is a better form of philanthropy. That is extremely stupid, because impact investing has no capability to do what philanthropy does. We are actually an add-on to philanthropy. Even that is a bad thing. We are actually nothing to do with philanthropy, but we are a mainstream that is very seamlessly connected to philanthropy. And for mainstream, our challenge is, and my challenge is, that every penny in the world has roughly $350 trillion of capital and cash. Every penny of that money should be conscious of what it is doing to the world. And I think what has happened in COVID is it has demonstrated that the risks that the world faces are very democratic. They will not only go to poor, they will go to rich also, especially if problems like COVID. That actually puts the fear of God in the minds of the powerful, because the world $300 trillion wants to grow from $300 to $400 trillion. It never conceptualized a position where the world's economy will contract. They never thought about it. And once they are thinking about it, they are actually fearful that any such similar disturbance in future will do more damage. And therefore, if the mainstream will adapt impact as the core, it will do so not because the poor are hungry or poor are walking thousands of kilometers. It is because the powerful are fearful. And why are powerful fearful? Because they don't want to lose wealth. They want to control wealth. And the world changes when the main decision makers actually feel fearful. And therefore, the impact is the new mainstream is my provocative statement to the world, that 0.1% of the world that controls money, that guys, you better adopt this because this will keep the world more resilient. And if the world is going to be more resilient, then your money will be protected. So it's in your interest to do it, not because poor needs it. And ultimately, coming to the whole idea of sustainable development goals, that's actually a vision of the governments of the world, not mine, not yours, where they want a world without hunger, without poverty, without inequity. If it has to happen, I was part with this business commission where we wrote this report, where we said that, and this was written in 2018, and we said you require $2.5 trillion every year for next 12 years, roughly $30 trillion. But that's only 1% of global capital. It's not a large amount of money. So it's not a dream that cannot be imagined. But it is also a very significant dream because the global governments of the world, including the World Bank and all the governments, that includes US and the Indian government, all put together have only $270 to $300 billion of donor capital. So the ask is 3 trillion, the donor capital is 300 billion, but the global capital is 300 trillion. So it is 1% of the global ask, but 100x of the global donor capital. And so you have to move this forward. And therefore, my personal belief is impact has to be adopted in the mainstream because the mainstream doesn't have a solution for a dying world. And for that, and nobody wants to die and nobody wants to lose all the wealth. So that's where the whole theory is.
So in some sense, it's a call for action by those who control capital and try and see, this as a opportunity and perhaps be more conscious of their investment they're making.
It's both a request and a warning.
Okay, yeah. Great. So now, but then there are all these innovative ways of also coming, raising capital. India, again, has mooted this new idea of social stock exchange. I know you're on the committee, right? With all the due respect to the confidentiality aspects, because it's still not a fully formed entity. There is a draft out there for public comments. But what can you share to educate us about this seemingly revolutionary idea of attracting capital for impact? Is this something that is going to solve some of that gap in the capital that we are seeing?
I think so. I think let's actually first start by, and I think there are lots of myths about it. And I was actually telling somebody that I think that people are a little confused. So I think the first and foremost, social stock exchange is a great idea. It is coming from the government. So very progressive idea. Now, what is it that the government wants? India has a very evolved social enterprise, for-profit social enterprise. There is also a fairly evolved, very evolved not-for-profit space in India. Now, if you go and ask any not-for-profit leader or any entrepreneur in social space, they all say we don't have money. Now, social stock exchange is probably seen as a panacea or a market money manufacturing place. Unfortunately, stock exchanges exist. They do not manufacture money, but they actually create a very engaging platform where money probably can find what it is seeking for. That's really the idea. Now, there have been other platforms, social stock exchanges in the world, but most of these social stock exchanges were experiments on stock exchanges and not necessarily a regulatory initiative by a government of a country. In that sense, what is happening in India is unparalleled, the whole idea of a social stock exchange. Second, it has nothing to do with the idea of creating a new social stock exchange. It is an idea of using a stock exchange to create social capital. That's the second part of it. We don't believe, and this committee has been very wise in that sense, has said that we don't want to create a new social stock exchange which itself will become an experiment. Our problem is to solve the flow of capital. And we will try to see what capital wants in order for it to go down to the not-for-profits of India and then some social enterprises of India. My belief is the government is extremely committed to the idea of taking significant amount of capital through the use of securities to the not-for-profit institutions of India. And that actually, in my view, may open up a very new cache of capital that we probably have never seen. Now, this would also probably align and bring in the international capital as well, both for-profit and not-for-profit enterprises. And there are some very innovative instruments that have been thought about. There is also a social venture capital fund, which actually exists already. It is not a new product, which can be exploited extremely. Now, interestingly, a social venture fund, there are 6 social venture funds in India. None of them actually use the potential that it offers. Social Venture Capital Fund of India is actually a alternate investment fund that allows you to do equity, debt, and grants all in one vehicle, which is regulated and transparent. So what India is trying to do using this social stock exchange is create regulation, oversight, regulatory oversight, transparency, and a very high-tech interface for somebody who is actually coming from a not-for-profit or for-profit world to access those who are actually either sitting far away or seeking significant transparency on impact as well as on returns. That's really what we are trying to do. Idea is to actually make it easier for the investor, not necessarily easier for the entrepreneur, because we believe entrepreneurs are already working on a very challenged circumstances, and for transparency they will have to work hard. We are not reducing their work. We want them to work harder so that the quality and transparency that can be showed to capital so that it can flow to them can be done. We also believe there is a need for a significant ecosystem to be built for any of these guys to actually really access that capital, if we are able to attract that capital. And then finally, to attract that capital to social stock exchange, a lot more market making needs to be done. So there are many things that needs to be done to create value. So long and short of it, I believe this is a path-breaking idea, but it is not going to deliver returns, or it is not going to deliver money until unless the entire ecosystem is built. So one should look at it as a 5 or 10 year time frame rather than into a 6 months, 12 months, or 18 months time frame for it to really deliver results.
But it does definitely sound quite revolutionary. I mean, it's like a way to unlock some patient capital that probably is out there looking for the right opportunities. So before we open it up for questions, Vineet, I cannot let you go without hearing some advice to the budding or already running social entrepreneurs. And there's so much energy, enthusiasm out there, thanks to the inspiration we all draw from people like you. But we are in difficult times, right? So what is the advice to these guys who are in different stages of building their dreams to change the world in their own way, but not bereft of any risk? Today we are going to in the midst of biggest risk the globe can offer. So what is the advice that you would give at this time?
Enjoy. First is enjoy yourself, because if you are not enjoying, you won't survive. That's one. Second, I think passion is important, compassion is important, but more than compassion and passion, perseverance is going to take you far. So I hear a lot of very passionate guys, but they have no clue what they are talking about. So basically, dirty your hand a little bit, try to figure out what it is. Don't try to change the world in 3 years. It didn't happen. I started 22 years back and I'm still struggling. Many others started much before me, and they are also still struggling. So don't expect miracles to happen. I think the most important thing that I can tell you is look for a problem and don't come up with a solution in search of a problem. 99.9% of the guys I meet have a solution to offer for a problem that they don't know. There are enough and more problems that you can see around, and some of our portfolio companies are a great example of the solutions. You have to, for example, I used to see this pile of what you call waste being piled up in Devnar and Ghazipur and Delhi, and I actually used to wonder, can I find an entrepreneur who can convert this waste mountain into a profitable business without government being a payer? And lo and behold, I have put in 100 odd crores in this company called Nepra, where we met these 2 young guys who on their own were trying to actually do something, doing a few lakh turnover. Today, they are actually doing 600 tons of waste recycling a day, 600 tons a day, all in 6 years, from 0 to 600 tons per day, all in 6 years. Now, so if you know a problem, India, every problem is so large. Now, this company will, in my view, in my prediction, is going to be India's first $1 billion unicorn doing waste, cleaning India. It's going to clean India and make $1 billion. Now, there are hundreds of companies you can build, cleaning India, treating India, supporting India financially, including, we have seen how many $1 billion you can build. find a good problem, solve it. You will actually create and solve problems. You will create jobs. You will change lives. Don't try to actually give solutions without knowing the problem.
Great. On that very inspiring note, let's see. Let's tackle some questions. We have some 15, 17 minutes for the show. So, Prerna, do we have any questions gathered from the audience?
Yes, sir. Actually, we have a lot of questions in the audience from the audience, and that was a very great session, sir. The first question we have is: in the brave new world of the world of mainstreaming impact finance, advocacy with governance, advocacy with governments will be an essential part of our strategy for the polity to accept this. What, in your opinion, what is your experience? What has been your experience so far, and what is your strategy with this regard?
It's too complex a question. I actually couldn't understand what the question is.
How does advocacy with government play a role in this whole mainstreaming impact investment?
So yeah, I think see, the problem is that government is probably the largest player when it comes to those who are actually disenfranchised, playing a role in their lives. Government plays a very large player. Not engaging with the government is quite unproductive, irrespective. And my belief is, therefore, engaging with the government, and we learned it the hard way in microfinance. We created MFIN. Actually, I don't know how many know the story of creation of MFIN, but we had all realized in microfinance there is a problem. Funnily, we organized a risk conference. The outcome of that came out MFIN, and we hosted MFIN for 6 months in Intellecap office in Hyderabad after creating it. But unfortunately, that did not stop the creation of the microfinance crisis of 2010. But what we have seen, the value of MFIN over years, engaging with the government, educating the government, that when today COVID crisis happens, Reserve Bank of India governor goes on record mentioning microfinance not once, not twice, 3, 4 times, specifically saying we will try to help microfinance. Now that's the value that advocacy brings. Impact investing is very wide. It is a big horizontal, unlike microfinance, which is a big sliver of vertical within a financial services. So the kind of advocacy that is needed is far more complex. You need to do in health, you need to do in agriculture, you need to do it in technology, you need to do in water, sanitation. We have created an Impact Investor Council as well, which actually engages with the government, tries to educate them on what we are trying to do. But as I always say, we need to create jobs where people live. I think if you ask anybody in the government, they understand that one of the reasons why migrants walked thousands and thousands of kilometers was simply because they had to come out of their homes because their jobs were not available. What we are doing at Impact Investing is creating enterprises and creating jobs where people live. And therefore, we are going to be a very big partner to the government. Now, Sustainable Development Goals actually makes impact investing right in the center of government's thought process. They may not know the word, they may not know the name, but impact investing is what Sustainable Development Goals is taking to them. And therefore, at some point of time, the government will wholeheartedly actually absorb the idea of impact investing. It's just a matter of time. So engagement is very important with the government. We don't want to be a threat to the government. We are a small player in the role, but we can actually create significant jobs and livelihoods and do it where people live. So.
Sir, the next question we have is it possible for entrepreneurship, capital and talent to coexist in one single frame?
Well, I don't know why it should not. If it doesn't exist in one frame, you will actually never create entrepreneurship and value. So I think the first thing of creating any value is capital. Capital is very dumb. Capital is not intelligent. Capital actually seeks an intelligent person to follow a path. Capital always follows, it never leads. So if we find intelligent people, capital's job is to just follow that person. And therefore talent has to first understand what entrepreneurship is and then find a good problem. Capital has no job but to follow those folks. So they always coexist, they will exist. Ultimately, a lot of people have very wrong notions and wrong understanding of meaning of capital. If capital was intelligent, it would have done all the business itself. Why does it chase entrepreneurs? Because it needs somebody who can tell it what to do. If the entrepreneurs tell the right story and are able to actually persevere through their vision, then capital is always happy. The conflicts start when some people, sometimes capital is dumb and also behaves strangely. But most of the time, entrepreneurs create over expectations and also are not able to persevere on the vision that they had shared with capital. That's where the conflicts are.
That's great, sir. So the next question is based on the lines of the SDG that you have explained to us, that in the post-COVID era, if we see as an impact investor, do you think that the idea that we have been fought, that minimizing the goal to have a world free of poverty and everyone free of, everyone above the poverty line having all the basic necessities that they have been craving for. So is this will this COVID era put a halt on that? Will it become a long shot?
Well, let's actually just hear what has happened. So just to give you some factual numbers, COVID has wiped out 20 years, 2 decades of work on poverty alleviation. Just to give you an idea, 300 odd million people will lose jobs full-time jobs, 300 million. 1.6 billion people would actually be out of informal jobs. That's a very large number. Extreme poverty is going to increase by 9%. And I think these statistics actually completely wipe out last 20 years of work, which has been probably phenomenal in terms of poverty reduction. So will the 2030 vision be delivered? I don't know. But what I can tell you is COVID has disrupted the world so massively. And I therefore believe that the whole challenge, and that's why my whole idea of challenging impact is the new mainstream, because now the work of 2030 is so difficult and so impossible that it cannot be done unless everybody wants to really join this. So the $300 trillion, that is the world capital, has to find a way to join this fight, because the $2.5 trillion that estimate that we had made in 2018 is irrelevant in the new context.
So this means that we need to extend the 2030 timeline and extend it to a different year.
We can continue to extend the timeline. My belief is you never extend the timeline. You just change the hard work that we have to put to bring about a change. And I think instead of $2.5 trillion, we need $20 trillion a year. And that can only come from mainstream capital. So we have to really embrace the mainstream capital and make them see our point of view. You cannot now wait. Time for wait is over. So you have to threaten, request, cajole, join, absorb, do whatever it takes. But the world needs to actually find a way to. I mean, see, nobody is doing a favor to anybody by creating a world that is equal. This is the aspiration of 193 governments of the world. It is not mine or Shashi's aspiration. I don't think so. We should be actually patient and try to change the deadline. We need to really become impatient. The time for, this is actually one of my favorite quotes. You have to actually have significant impatience with patience.
That's nice, sir. So the next question is, how do you measure the social return on investment of the companies that you have invested in?
That's a sheer waste of time. We don't do it.
Yeah, so sorry to interrupt, Brenna. So one question, Vineet, now that with this whole pandemic, the landscape of the need for digital has also been shifting, right? So there's much more urgency of all that. So do you think technology will probably come handy in achieving the target, given that this pandemic is throwing new opportunities as well along with threats?
See, what I have seen and what I have experienced in my work during impact investing is, so just to take agriculture, let's take agriculture as an example. I have made investments in dairy. I have created largest dairy in Orissa and largest dairy in Jharkhand. Very simplistic, classical business model we have created. And then we have actually gone ahead and done something like in farm productivity, a company called INI Farms, which essentially grows pomegranates, exports, become India's largest pomegranate exporter. 10 years from zero to largest India's exporter. Then we have actually gone and created companies like Ergos and Agrostar, both actually doing something which is physical, but massively digital. One is trying to take inputs to farmers and deliver them at their doorstep, but using a digital pathway. And the other is actually trying to digitize grain in Samastipur and Bihar. Now, what is unique about these two entities is the potential of scale and the pace at which they can grow. Which is quite beyond imagination that I had ever thought. So technology's ability to create disruption in dealing with those who are disenfranchised is just amazingly path-breaking. The appreciation of technology that I had in last 10 years on its ability to create scale, and in microfinance as well, even in Arohan for our own microfinance institution, we are 100% paperless, 100% disbursement is cashless, 54% collection is cashless, and it has all happened in last 12 months, 18 months. Now, the moment you actually have this kind of ability, this ability only comes when you are able to go digital. Also, interestingly, one of the visions when we acquired Arohan was that I always saw microfinance as a cash logistics business. So it was never a financial inclusion business, but a logistics business. Our claim to fame was we were delivering cash to people in their hands. Today, we wanted to be a financial inclusion company where we help the individual at the end migrate to the efficiencies that was created. And it has happened. It used to look like a stupid idea, but actually, and not just Arohan, I think many other institutions have also been able to do it. So it's quite remarkable. And I saw it in Africa as well, where just out of compulsion, everything is digital. So they don't have a concept of taking cash around. So it's quite fascinating to see how challenges allows transitioning and transformative changes to take place. And technology, therefore, is going to be very, very vital for the pace that we are looking for SDGs goals.
So in the same vein, there are some questions from audience also on this area that you think AI is going to be a big thing for the social sector, with the technology also taking the lead?
Yeah, I think AI, ML, these are all cliches. I mean, neobank. I mean, I'm actually a little tired. Artificial intelligence, what is it? Artificial intelligence is when the computer itself has the capability to recorrect itself using all the algorithm it has. Of course, anything that is intelligent or tries to mimic human behavior will have a role to play. Yes, it will have a role to play. Will it have a bigger role to play than something else that will come tomorrow? I don't know, and I don't think so. So I just treat AI as just another technological thought process. I have actually gone through all the discussion from Ruby to Ruby on Rails to whatnot. I had zero understanding of each one of them, but I looked at each one of these thought processes, and every time I heard that this is going to change the world. Similarly, I've heard about blockchain changing the world. Similarly, we have heard about ML, machine learning changing the world. Yes, all of them will play a role in changing the world, but these are instruments to change the world. They are not to change in the world.
So Prerna, you can take a few more questions, I think.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sir, what are your views on risk associated with high impact, high cash burning companies?
So, Prerna, first, I am not a sir because the Queen has not yet knighted me. So when I will let you know. My name is Vineet. The second is that anybody who is burning cash, I don't see any impact in a company that burns cash. So anybody who actually is excited about burning cash, I don't know where they see impact. But if they have all their cash, personal cash, and they can burn it, I don't have a problem.
Yeah. So the next question is, what does the impact situation looks like in the post-COVID era, which has actually forced most of the companies, most of the sectors to go to realize the importance of digitalization in their operations?
So I think digital is, as I said, I think whether it's post or pre-COVID, if you are in the space of impact, technology is very crucial and critical. But more interestingly, the COVID world actually came up with a new classification around impact investing called the essential services versus non-essential services. And funnily, impact investing massively benefited because most of our businesses are in essential services. And so suddenly the world of investors, I had some of my LPs who called me up and said, how many companies are dying? I actually said, oh, sorry, none of my companies are dying. They said, oh, we are only looking for companies that are dying. This is the first time ever in my history I had called from my LPs who only wanted to know dying companies and not surviving companies. And I said, why don't you give me money? I have companies doing well, they will do even better. They said, no, we are only interested in company if they're dying. So that's actually one of the challenges of how the world works. The money works on mandates. So the mandate of the money is to look for a dying company. It will not see value in a growth company. And it gets so hilarious. So that's why I say money is not intelligent. It can never be intelligent. It's always dumb. Entrepreneurs are intelligent. In the hierarchy in the pyramid of intellectual capability, entrepreneur sits at the top, and the people with large pools of capital sit at the bottom of the intellectual hierarchy. When it comes to resource hierarchy, unfortunately, the pyramid changes. The entrepreneur sits at the bottom, and people with capital sit at the top. And therefore, you might have to invert the pyramid of resource and keep the intellectual property pyramid the same way it is.
So Vineet, there are a lot of MFI colleagues also on the whole audience, as you can imagine, and you did credit microfinance for sort of showing the way for impact investing. A lot of people are wondering what would microfinance business look like in the next phase, post-COVID phase. Any thoughts on that?
So I had actually written a note in May. It's actually on LinkedIn. You can check it out. I said the return of India will be driven by agriculture and microfinance. This is exactly the day Mr. Deepak Parekh had gone on record saying microfinance is going to struggle the most. I actually wrote it in response to him, saying the only financial institutions they will not really struggle is going to be microfinance. And my answer is very logical, not really because I am emotionally attached to microfinance. A microfinance entrepreneur becomes cash positive in 1 day to 30 days. Any other business takes 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, and sometimes 5 years. So therefore, it is illogical for somebody to say that microfinance will struggle. Microfinance will come back to the track the fastest, and therefore will play, along with agriculture, will play a defining role in the recovery. I'm actually making this proud statement because I've been proven right to some extent. My personal belief is microfinance will take a hit of around 5% odd in terms of defaults. That's really my takeaway. And we are actually, and I'm not talking about it by making an in generic statement. We actually ran demonetization data. We ran an entire trajectory of demonetization data. And our belief is that if you are following the ECL model, which is what we follow, then you might actually see a peak coming at 15% and then come down to around 5% in terms of your write-off, net write-off. So yes, microfinance will take a hit, but it is going to be much smaller than what the NBFC and the banking sector is going to take. Does microfinance need to evolve? Yes, microfinance will see consolidation. Next phase, I would see a serious consolidation. A large number of small microfinance institutions have already realized this game is becoming more and more tough because with demonetization, GST, and then COVID, there have been just too many shocks in too short a period of time. I think consolidation is not a new thing and will happen. But this time the consolidation will be between big boys. So that would be actually one interesting thing. The other interesting thing I think is the child of the microfinance client today is going to be very digital and very different from the mother. And therefore, the kind of discipline and the kind of meetings that you have been doing and used to, you might have to really go on towards a virtual meeting set sooner than later. You would see a fairly significant digital behavior because the daughter of the lady who is your current client would not be able to tolerate the kind of I don't want to say it, but the kind of unfortunate asks we put on our clients of the discipline, the time, etc. Yes, that was valid in 74, 75, 80, 85, 90. But as Professor Malcolm Harper always used to say, microfinance is the shittiest product ever invented. I actually completely agree with him. None of us, neither Ashashi nor Vineet, will ever take a microfinance loan. We won't stand in 5 people's group and actually stand guaranteed to each other. We need to evolve the product. Yes, social collateral is important. We need to find a digital collateral. We might need to make it far more private. Right now, we are actually taking an individual's life. We have no respect for privacy. So there are many other questions that will come in, which probably, given that the money was more important than anything else, but as money is getting commoditized, you might have to actually move to other sensitive areas.
So on that positive yet provocative note, Vineet, I cannot thank you enough for your time and your wisdom. More than 700-800 people enjoyed this show on both the channels, Zoom and Facebook Live. So thank you everyone who has taken time to log in and spend your valuable time with us. Please stay tuned. There will be more such very informative sessions we'll be hosting in next months and weeks and months to come. And thank you again, Vineet, and thanks everyone. Have a good evening and good morning from wherever you call.
Thank you.
Thank you.